Today for classwork, we are going to be working on this lesson 14 page, and we're going to learn how to do from ratio tables, equations. We're not doing double number lines, so you can cross that out, and diagrams to plots on the coordinate plane. So today we're going to start with this situation in the soccer team. So it says Kelly is traveling by train with her soccer team from Yonkers, New York to Morgantown, West Virginia for a tournament. The distance between Yonkers and Morgantown is 400 miles. The total trip will take 8 hours. The train schedule is provided below. So you can see where they will start leaving Yonkers and they'll go to Allentown. That's 100 miles. Then Pennsylvania, and then they get to Morgantown, and then you're going to have to go backwards and go from Morgantown to Berkeley to Carlisle to Allentown to finally back home. This says exercise, do this with a partner. We're not actually going to do it with a partner today. You're just going to do it on your own, and you're going to check back in these videos to make sure you're on the right track. So it says create a table to show the time it will take Kelly and her team to travel from Yonkers to each town listed in the schedule, assuming that the ratio of the amount of time traveled to the distance traveled is the same for each city. Then extend the table to include the cumulative, and cumulative means you keep adding together the times. So like if this takes an hour and then you go to the next city and that takes an hour, now you've done 2 hours. And the next city takes another hour, now you've done 3 hours. So it just keeps adding on. So include the cumulative, keep adding together the times from place to place, time it will take to reach each destination on the ride home. So they did tell us that Morgantown was 400 miles and that's an 8-hour trip. So right here we have our initial relationship. So the first thing I asked myself is, can I figure out, using the horizontal structure, what the multiplicative comparison or relationship is between the hours and the miles traveled? And in this case, it would be, you can figure that out, and then you need to use that to figure out the rest of the times in here. Once you have this table filled out, so you're going to push pause when I'm done explaining. Once you have it filled out, you'll push play and check to see if you were on the right track. So if you are back with me, it means that you figured out your table. You figured out that this was a relationship of times 5. So 8 hours times 5 is 400 miles. So then, if I simplify that, I know that that's 50 miles an hour. So up here would be 2 hours that it took me to go 100 miles, or my first stop to Allentown. My next stop is another 100 miles, so that's another 2 hours. So that would be 4 hours that I've traveled so far, and a total of 200 miles. Then I have 6 hours, 300, 8. Now I see the pattern. I can just continue that instead of doing the times 5. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800. So now that we have our table, the next thing we're going to do is we need to answer this question. If dinner service starts once the train is 250 miles away from Yonkers, what is the minimum time the players will have to wait before they can have their meal? So we're going to make a graph from this table right here to answer that question. Because we don't have 250 in our chart, we're going to put it on a graph and then look for that answer on the graph. Remember, you need to put a title on your graph. You need to label the x-axis word and label the y-axis word, and definitely make sure you have that consistent scale. So over here, when we have the ratio of 2 hours for 100 miles, that creates our ordered pairs. From a few problems that you've had in Prodigy and some other places, it seems that you guys have been pretty good with your ordered pairs. Remember that they are made with parentheses and a comma between them. This is going to be our x coordinate, or 2, and this is going to be our y coordinate, 100. So as you write those pairs in, you're just going to copy this chart over here. You get your ordered pairs. These numbers here are going to decide what your scale should be down here on the x-axis. We usually put our time, hours, along that x-axis here. And then the miles is going to go over here on the y-axis. Make sure you put a title a label, and consistent scales down here. Again, once you go ahead and push pause after I'm done here and make that chart on your own, and then check back in the video to see if you have done it correctly. So if you are back with me, it means you have your graph done and you're ready to check to see if you did it the same way I did. So you should have a title, something along the lines of time and distance traveled, or a soccer team's travels, something like that. You should have had the word hours down here on your x-axis, and you should have the word miles over here on your y-axis. You should have these ordered pairs written that correlate with the hours and the miles. And then your scale should have been like over here. Let's see if I can make this a little clearer. A little bit. They went by 100 in this case, and so every line was 100. Yours was a little bit smaller than that, so I probably would have gone like 0, 100. I would have probably done each line was 50, but I would have only labeled every 100. So I don't have to label every line. I just have to make sure that there's a consistent scale. So I probably would have done it like that. Down at the bottom, again, this is pretty small. So I probably, since I have to go up to 16, I would have done, each line would have been an hour, but I would have only labeled every 2 hours. So this is really 1. I'm just not going to put a label there because it's small. This is 3, no label. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. I could keep going, but I don't have to, but that's just up to you. And then when you go to chart your ordered pairs, remember that you need to go X, Y. You always go to the left or right first, then up or down. Left, X, Y. So since it's 2 and 100, I would go start at 0, go over 2, and then up to 100 and put a dot there to mark that. My next one was 4 and 200. So again, start at 0, go over 4, up to 200. Where they intersect, that's where I put the next dot. So you should have had dots like these at 2 and 100, 4 and 200, 6 and 300, etc. So make sure you have those dots in place, just like this one. Then we can answer that question, where would they be at 250 miles would have been right here, and that would have also been halfway between here, so it would have taken them 5 hours before they could have their meal. So the minimum time is 5 hours. Now that we've done that one, see if you can complete this problem down here with Dominic and fill in the table here, labeling the things you need up here, and finishing the table and answering these 2 questions. If you get through that, show this to your teacher so they can look to see if you have all the parts that are necessary, and then you can spend some time on Prodigy Game. If you have extra time left in the class, make sure that you pick up your homework, which is going to be Lesson 14 problem set. I apologize, I did not put it on blue paper. So it is on white paper, so you might want to make sure that you write homework on it so that you recognize that it is the homework that you're supposed to do for math today.